Thank you for the introduction. So as I was mentioning, my name is Donald Weber. Myself, I'm a co-founder of T10 Collective, and my co-founder as well, Matthew Winters, is hosting this session with me as well. So we're going to walk you through some information, hopefully share a little bit of insight, but also answer any questions. This is the the initial session, first session of this digital marketing workshop, and today we'll be talking about how to use the social media algorithm to your benefit. So not only understanding what it is, but how do you actually use it and adapt to it to drive engagement and following. So I know it's something that we received feedback was a pressing topic. So we made sure we wanted to get as deep into it as possible. So with that, let's get things started. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so today's agenda, first of all, we're very excited to have everybody here. We're excited for the opportunity to present to you all. Myself and Matthew are both Harlem residents. A lot of businesses and services that are part of this community are ones that we frequent or visit. So we're excited to kind of participate in this community. So we're going to walk through a few different topics. We're going to start by kind of giving us a little background on who we are, introduce ourselves, give a little bit of our story, and then really get through the rules of the road, and then talk about the social media algorithm, what it is, then get into why does it exist, what are some of the key trends and topics that revolve around it, and then ultimately, how do we make them work for you? And I really want to emphasize here, as Nicole mentioned, that this isn't really, we intend for this to be a collaborative discussion. We want to engage. We have a few interactive polling questions that we've put in between this presentation. So it's going to be facilitated through a platform called Mentimeter. So we'll ask that you either use your smartphone or a different browser to kind of engage, and you can kind of see where the responses fall. But we do also want this to be a playbook, something that you can take back and use to refer to when applying it to your business or your brand. So we've intentionally made this very detailed in the latter part as well. So we hope that that kind of facilitates some of the need and the request that came from the community. Okay, so with that, I think we'll go to the next slide. And we'll talk a little about who we are. So I'll turn it over to my co-founder, Matthew, to talk about himself first, and I'll get into my background.
Thanks, Donnie. Thank you for joining us this morning, everyone. It's great to meet you. Great to have you. Really looking forward to this. Thank you to Nicola. Thank you to Morgan and Harlem Park for this opportunity. As Donnie mentioned, we have a lot of information to cover, but again, a lot of this is really centered around you. So at any point, as Donna mentioned, if you have any questions, there's no such thing as a dumb or stupid question, even if it's something that we've already covered. Because again, the goal of this is to make sure that you walk away feeling empowered, feeling knowledgeable, and really feeling like you're capable of being able to take all of the information that we're going to provide to be able to use it towards growing your respective businesses. So a little bit about myself. In addition to being co-founder of T10 Collective, I head up our marketing and partnerships, but I've spent the last 10 plus years working in the advertising space, working to help make a lot of big and small brands essentially make a lot of money. And because of that, I've been able to get a lot of deep knowledge and understanding how they use marketing, use a lot of the tactics that we're going to be covering today to help them grow their respective businesses. But just because they have thousands of millions of dollars to be able to spend doesn't mean that the tactics that they employ are any different than the things that we can use as small business owners to be able to actually grow our businesses. And so leaning on that experience and also leaning on just understanding the small business community and the ways that a lot of the social media tools that are at our disposal are constantly evolving. I especially want to be able to make sure that a lot of the tactics and the tools and the best practices that I've learned across my career, I'm able to help you all to learn and to be able to use in your respective businesses. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. And then as for my background, so I come from a management consulting background. I spent most of my career working within a large before consulting firm, helping mid-sized and large companies penetrate new markets, grow their brands, build out different strategies, improve their profitability. And then I also dabbled into a little bit of M&A working as well. So helping companies raise capital, gain credit, merge with other entities as well. So I've done a lot of different space and work in there. I've also worked in different industries. So I've worked in the consulting industry, working for small businesses to large enterprises across healthcare, financial services, retail. And then I also spent some time in the sports and entertainment industry doing a little bit of the same kind of work around business strategy and also in the med tech world. So I kind of have a diverse set of background from different industries. But all that saying, I think it drills down into figuring out ways to operationally and strategically help businesses grow their brands, whether and achieve their goals through different things. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell there. So if we go to the next slide, I think that kind of transitions well into our story. So you'll see here, three of us here. So our co-founder, Kevin, couldn't join us today. But the three of us are Harlem residents and native New Yorkers who kind of delved into different industries. Myself, more the consultant, business strategy, Matthew, marketing, social media, Kevin, actually investment banking, who's our third partner on the far left. So the three of us, we spent a wealth of experience kind of in corporate America, and we wanted to find a way to kind of pour those resources back into our community. So we've been exploring different ways to do that, and that's how kind of T10 was founded. So T10 Collective is an agency and a syndicate that focuses on providing social media and also just general consulting services to businesses in the community. We also, just as we're doing today, we curate workshops and webinars from everywhere, from organizations like public schools to community centers to small business organizations as well. We create thought-provoking content, and we're also launching mission-driven initiatives. So everything kind of comes back to this essence of really working within the community. So that's kind of what we lean on, and we use our experience to kind of execute. And with that, we can move to the next slide. Yep. Okay. So yeah, so some just general rules of the road. Again, as I was mentioning, everyone here will receive the materials that are being presented. So, don't feel that you have to take every single note down or anything like that. We got you. We'll take care of you. We'll make sure you have access. Also, as we mentioned at the beginning of the call, we are recording now. So you will have accessibility to a replay. So again, if you're looking to refresh, you'll have access to that. We do ask that all microphones stay on mute until we get to the Q&A section. But of course, if you have questions along the way, please feel free to add them in the chat or also raise your hand, and we can, bring that right up, because we do want to make this a collaborative discussion. Again, any questions, feel free to send it in the chat box. Myself and Matthew will be monitoring it throughout the course of this webinar, so we'll make sure to stay on top of that. And then lastly, we'll roll out a survey at the conclusion of this, and we just ask that you provide us any feedback. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, what information you might want learn more about, what did you find helpful. Because again, throughout the course of this 8-part series, our goal is to provide you with as much content as possible and be there as a support to support you. So your feedback is welcome, and hopefully it'll help us kind of provide a better experience for you. Okay. And I think with this rules on the road, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll transition to our first kind of polling question.
Again, as we mentioned in the beginning, plan to keep this extremely conversational, but also I did want to set a baseline for what algorithms are. I know it's one of those words that we've probably been hearing back since we were in math. I definitely wasn't the best at math, and I definitely wasn't the best at algorithms, but social media algorithms is something that you don't necessarily have to understand the complexity of how they work, the math behind it. But throughout this presentation, you will be able to understand what they are from a social media standpoint and how you can actually use them. And so to answer the question, here is the actual textbook definition of what an algorithm is. So it's essentially an automated calculation that decides which social media posts make it to the top of your feed and which don't. And so as most of us are actually just end users ourselves of these social media platforms, a lot of times we've seen over the last few years where our feeds have changed, in addition to the types of content that actually appear at the top of each feed. And that's not by accident. Facebook, Instagram as well, which is a subsidiary of Facebook, and all of the respective social media platforms, they're prioritizing everything that you're doing on each platform to be able to figure out what is the most relevant to you and what is least relevant to you. Because At the end of the day, they want to make sure that they're providing you with the best user experience because it works for them, but it also works for you. And so with that said, social media algorithms are working in real time all day, every day. And it's not just your Facebook and your Instagram. As you can see, algorithms are working on Google. So for YouTube, if any of you are avid YouTube users, the videos that you get suggested, the ads that you actually get are all curated based on the actual content that you already view. So if you, watch a lot of makeup videos, if you watch a lot of sports videos, regardless of the type of content that you watch or engage with, each platform has an algorithm that is essentially learning as you engage to be able to identify what actually works best for you, and what are some things that you're just not as interested in based on the fact that you either drop off a lot earlier in the experience or the opposite, you make it all the way through. They rightfully so are assuming that because you watched it all the way through, especially if it's a longer form piece of content, because we're in times where attention spans are extremely low. So if someone is able to watch, a 3, 5, 10-minute video, they're going to make sure that the algorithm updates it to be able to present you with more content that resembles that.
Matthew, if I could just interject for just 1 second.
Yeah.
To pull the room real quick. Can everyone see the slides? Because I did see some folks in the chat that were saying they're having difficulty. Okay, so I see some yeses.
Yeah, okay. I was just about to send a message about that. Okay, so everyone can see? Okay.
Okay, all right, so okay. Good. All right, just
okay, perfect.
For anyone who's still having difficulties, please, I'll try to engage in the chat as well. All right, sorry about that.
Perfect. Thanks, Don. No problem. All right. So moving on. So what does that mean? So essentially, social media sites know what their users are going to come back for every single time you log on. So think about it. If you logged on today, you're going to see content that is going to be relevant to what you did yesterday or even in the past. As you use each of these platforms, they're consistently learning by the second what are the things that actually matter to you and how can they improve your user experience for next time. And so essentially what they do is they make that happen by pushing irrelevant content, at least on a consistent user basis, further away from your newsfeed. So, think about it in terms of, your friends group or your family. There may be some friends and family that you don't necessarily like their posts, you don't necessarily comment, you may not even sometimes view it, you may just scroll right past it. The system is essentially reading it and understanding that you're not as interested in that content, even though it is someone who they can perceive as being close to you, or even someone that's in your family. And so it goes back to the point of them wanting to make sure that not only is the user experience as fluid as possible, but it's also as relevant as possible. And so knowing that, they want to make sure that the most relevant and the most engagement worthy, the most view worthy content is at the top of your feed, because that's where you're actually going to spend the majority of your time. So for example, this is essentially what my feed looks like. I am, a huge sports fan. I also am I guess you can call a home chef. I love cooking videos. I love sneakers. I love music, and I watch a lot of business related content on social media. And so based off of the fact that I either like, comment, share, view a lot of these videos, in addition to the content that obviously is that my friends and family post, they're learning that, okay, this guy likes all of these things, so I'm going to send him an ad for this on the right. So that is literally a picture of something that I received in my feed. This isn't just a general example, but just goes to show that they're learning that all these things factor into all the ads that you'll see. And I know sometimes we all have those weird, awkward moments where, we may be speaking about something or even we're on another site and all of a sudden it pops up in our feed. None of that is by accident, because the algorithm is learning as you interact, even on sometimes other platforms, to be able to make sure that once you get onto the social media platform, they can essentially drive you towards a business. And so the same way that, this looks like it's a sports fitness ad, the same way that this ad pops up in a user feed, that's essentially the same way that you want to make sure that your brand pops up in someone else's feed. And what we're going to do as the slides go on is help you to understand the ways that you can make sure that you are reaching people like me who have shown some kind of digital engagements or some type of digital metric to show that this person is a qualified potential customer for you. So where did it all happen? I know for some of you, we've all been on social media and Facebook specifically for a number of years. But in 2018 is actually when we started to see a lot of the changes that we're experiencing now happen. So obviously Facebook really started as a way for you to interact with your friends and families, and some of those Facebook groups that we would have identified based on our interests that we're into. All of that content was seen as essentially more relevant than anything that an organization or a business could ever post. And back then, Facebook's business model, though it was still predicated on ads, it was definitely a lot different because they wanted to make sure that they towed a fine line of making sure that, friends and family posts, which are essentially what they thought people really wanted to view on their platforms, were always at the top, and anything that a business or organization was posting would be further at the bottom. But in order back then for a brand to actually be able to break through, they really had to make sure that anything that they were posting was really, really engaging. So any kind of content that was going to get comments, reactions, any kind of replies, and actually the most important interaction outside of any of those are if they were sharing it. Because if you think about it, if someone feels so passionate about something, whether positively or negatively, that they want to share it to a friend, that creates a constant stream of interactions where now that friend can potentially share it. And that's how you get virality, where there's posts that everyone has seen, whether it's something that's funny or whether it's something that's a little bit more serious. It's because of the sharing that goes on naturally on these platforms. But then in 2019, it actually changed a bit. They started prioritizing higher quality original video. Because as opposed to it just becoming a feed that was all predicated on having a lot of users just posting content, they wanted to make sure that the content that is higher quality, whether that's in terms of audio, whether it's in terms of the actual quality of the image, they wanted to make sure that the most beautiful content essentially and the most noteworthy content was actually rising to the top. And if you were paying attention, 2019, you also noticed that you were starting to see a lot more longer form video. So whereas social media has always been about, telling short form stories, you used to see a lot of content under 60 seconds. But now, ever since 2019, any video that is over a minute and something that can hold someone's attention for longer than 3 minutes is naturally going to rise up in the algorithm. Because again, going back to the engagement point, that is something that people are engaging with, potentially going to share more from, potentially learn more from. And so for Facebook, it essentially just became good business for them to be able to prioritize having any kind of video content that was going to keep people on their platforms. And so this is how it works today. From 2018 all the way to 2021, obviously we're in a very different world than we were in 2018 and 2019 for very different reasons. But what Facebook has done based off all those learnings that they've had over the last few years is that it's going to take every single post that potentially could appear in your newsfeed. So think of every business that you follow, every friend that you follow. If you have 50 followers, 500 followers, 5,000 followers, it's going to take all of the content that could potentially ever come from those pages, and it's going to kind of rank them. So based on all the factors that I mentioned before, it's going to rank all of them and essentially give them a score based off of the quality of it, based off of who it's coming from, and based off of the previous engagement around it. And then what it does is, as I mentioned, it moves any post from people or companies that you rarely engage with further down the feed. So in some instances, you can actually mute them. You can actually block some of this content if it ends up being something that is completely disfavorable. But essentially what they want to do is deprioritize them because you've already shown based off of all of the metrics that you do on the platform that it's actually something that you're not interested in. We've also heard the word clickbait a lot over the last few years, especially as Facebook has gone under so much scrutiny for a lot of fake news, essentially. They want to make sure that they're also deprioritizing this type of content as well, because not only do they have, the government on their behinds for that, they also have their users who don't want that type of experience on their feeds because ultimately it's going to drive them away. And then finally, what they do is they essentially do a mix of the two. They're thinking of all of the content that you love, mix it with some businesses that you're more likely to engage with. And so they create almost a cross section of different types of content to be able to make sure that you have some variety within your feed and you're not looking at the exact same thing every single day. So hopefully that all makes sense. But just in terms of what those key factors are, again, these are the four most important things that the algorithm actually looks for when it's putting together your recommendations of content. So number one is going to be the relationship. What's the user's relationship to the person who or company that's posting it? There are ways that they can infer if someone is actually a friend based off the fact that you comment on their posts, you like all their posts consistently. You may have actually tagged them in some of your photos. So it shows that there's a much stronger relationship to that person or that business based off of the different interaction points. But then also they're going to factor in the content type. So as I mentioned, video content has been overwhelmingly prioritized. Whereas if you think a few years back when Instagram really just started out, it was all about photos. It was all about, really being able to have the most high quality photos, almost like a photo album. But since then, it obviously has changed. And so they want to be able to make sure that the content type is going to factor into the type of content that you're actually going to be shared with. Also popularity. And when we say popularity, it's not necessarily a popularity contest in terms of, if they have millions of followers. And while that is a factor, the reality is that the majority of people who are on social media platforms don't actually have, those buku amounts that any influencer or celebrity has. And so what popularity actually means is this something that is popular content to that user? So is it something that, a user in the past has commented on similar content? Is it content that is posted by a page that that person follows, that their friends follow? Essentially, they're going to dangle content in front of you to be able to determine based off of your engagement with it, not just your viewership, but your engagement, if this is something that is actually popular and relevant to you. And then the final factor, and arguably one of the most important ones, and we're going to have some conversation later on in the presentation about this one as well, is recency. So I know through the questionnaire that we sent out prior to the session, a lot of you had a question about when is the right time to actually post, or is there such a thing as the right time to actually post? And I can definitively say that you should absolutely keep in mind as a business when you're posting, because you want to make sure that you give yourself the most opportunity to be able to reach as many of your customers as possible. And the best way to be able to do that, to ensure that you're not being deprioritized based off of content that, is flooding the timeline, and you're not able to break through, is recency, making sure that you're posting at those peak hours. And so we're going to have some conversations later about how you actually do that. But these are the four main things that you want to keep in mind, knowing that this is what the algorithm is actually going to be prioritized.
I see a question here.
Yep.
Oh, did you respond to that, Terry? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just looking at the computer. I see you just responded to Terry's question. I was on my phone. So Terry,
Oh, no, okay, Nicole, it's all good. Yeah, so Matthew, a quick question that came up in the chat from Terry was understanding the feed.
Mm-hmm.
Could you maybe explain the feed in more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. So think of your feed as a consistent scroll. So again, Facebook wants to be able to make sure that Facebook, and when I say Facebook, I mean social media platforms in general, but Facebook being the largest, I'm going to use them as the primary example here. But your feed essentially is the stream of content that you're seeing at that time. And so if you're on your Facebook, it's going to look a little bit different than what your Instagram is going to look like typically. But think of your feed as what you're scrolling through. And so essentially what they want to be able to make happen, and a lot of brands in kind of the advertising world, they'll call it, what is thumb stopping content? So what is that content that's going to make you, as you're scrolling through your feed, whether it's for 30 seconds or 30 minutes, what's going to get you to actually stop and interact with that post? And so think of your feed as every single user who actually uses any of these platforms, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or what have you, when they get onto their feed, it's going to look very different. So my feed, I showed you all the things that I like. It's going to look very different than Donnie's, and it's going to look very different than Nicole's. And that's the way it's curated. But think of the feed as the flow of information that a user is seeing on their platform. And you want to be able to make sure that your content is going to be either the next suggested one or just something that is going to be adjacent to content that they like at the top of their feed. Hopefully that answers the question, but if not, definitely let me know. Okay, cool. I can't actually see the chat. So if someone has...
I'm following it.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I'm following it.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So again, with all that said, brand content, which is essentially all of your businesses, is going to be a major attractor of anything that has views and engagements. Because again, think about it in terms of Facebook being a business at the end of the day. Yes, they're a platform. Yes, they are. They're in the business of wanting to make sure that we have a great user experience. But at the end of the day, what they really want to be able to make sure is they can create ad revenue. Because I can tell you from being on the other end of it, what they're telling these big brands is that I can provide you with your target customer because I know that I have clusters and large segments of audiences who engage with content that is relevant to your brand. So if you pay me, 1,000, 5,000, 500,000, you'd be surprised at the amount that these brands, or maybe not surprised at the amount that these brands spend to be able to pump ads into users' feeds, because I'm sure we've all seen it recently. So many of the content that you actually see, maybe 1 out of every 4 pieces of content is going to be an ad. You're going to see that little sponsored notification under the name of the brand to let you know that it's an ad. But Facebook's business model is predicated on this. And so the way that you as a brand want to make sure that you can benefit from this is that they're going to be looking for content that you're posting, but they want to make sure they're looking for the content that is going to be something that is going to drive a ton of views and content that's also going to drive a ton of engagements, because ultimately that is going to lead to more ad revenue for them. And then in order for them to be able to give you some kind of a payoff, they're going to prioritize your content into the feed, which is going to help your business, but also is going to help them as well. So just make sure to think of it as something that's very reciprocal, because once you understand how Facebook is making money off of this, you'll understand how you can help them by helping yourself. And the best way to do that is to make content that they're going to view as high engagement drivers, because that is going to help you rise to the top of the feed. Moving along.
We have a couple
again,
of questions.
Oh yeah,
a couple of questions.
Yeah, Donald, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, of course. So, okay, just quickly, we have a few questions about the algorithm, how it weights scrolling. I'm going to actually have a section in the latter end that speaks to it by platform. So if you could hold on to your question, we'll likely address that in the later slides. But if you still have any, we're keeping a log, so we'll make sure to circle back. We do have one question that's not actually as algorithm related, more so about, so actually more of a scenario question. So if you have several sales targets, would you recommend using your limited budget to target the sales target that will give you the most engagement to the exclusion of the other targets? So the way I interpret that is, if you have a sales target and you have a budget, you target that sales target, but then potentially exclude any other potential targets.
Yeah. So I think I actually think again, our dollars are very valuable to us as small businesses, and so you want to make sure that your dollar is going as far as possible. And so based off everything I just said, where engagement is really the top metric in terms of being able to drive that conversion, that actual interaction with your brand, and hopefully a sale, I would definitely suggest you prioritize putting your money specifically towards a target that is actually going to drive engagement. Because although your secondary or tertiary target is going to be important to your business, and I'm definitely not saying that you should ignore them, where you put your actual spend, I would definitely prioritize putting it towards a target group that you've already identified as being a high engager with your brand, because that's actually going to give you that return on the investment. Whereas someone in your secondary target may look at it and they may potentially come back to it down the line, but you're not going to be able to see an immediate return the way that high engager would.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And then is it fair also to maybe suggest, kind of some practices we use with clients around the testing you know?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. So a big strategy that for any consulting client that we have, excuse me, is testing and learning. I'm a big proponent of testing and learning everything, because you can literally learn something about everything that you do on the social media platform. So whether it's, if I post as a brand longer content, maybe I want to test out what happens when I have shorter content that just gets straight to the point. Every business is different. And obviously we have representation of a variety of businesses in different fields, and having different audiences. And so there's no one way to say that, having a little bit longer of a copy is going to turn your audience off, because in your business and in your field, they may actually be looking for a little bit more detail. But I would say testing and learning those little things, those little tweaks that you can make to determine who's the right audience, what does your audience respond to, what are the things that actually get them to engage with you more. And in a few slides, we're actually going to talk about some of those specific hard-hitting tactics that you can do. But yes, I would definitely say that you should test and learn as much as possible, because there's no one way to do something on a consistent basis. As the platform evolves, like I showed you, it evolved over the last few years. Your approach should evolve as your business approaches their social media strategy.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
All right, perfect. Were there any more questions?
Tracking it, we also are seeing some questions just around the Facebook business pages. This is content we'll get to, so I think we can address this likely in the later slides and get more into the details. So if I ask you to hold on for a quick second, we might address some of that in the later slides.
All right, perfect.
Here. And then that question also from a budget perspective also kind of gives me an indication that the question was around paid advertising.
Got it.
Where most of what we're talking to today is from more of like a I would say an organic perspective. But when you get into paid, which will be part of our sessions later on in this workshop series, there's definitely a ton of strategies using various platforms that help you automate it, right? So you can do a testing phase where you put limited dollars up front, gain the analytics using different platforms, a lot of which are free. And then that could give you the insights on where to delve deeper and put more of your dollars, so you're getting more bang for your buck. So yeah, definitely from a budgetary perspective, it's best to do the learnings with few dollars up front. Then as you gather data and insight, you're making informed decisions on where to really allocate your budget, especially if you're working with a limited budget at the time.
Yep, exactly. And so as Donnie mentioned, everything that you're going to see today is really focused on the organic. It's focused on things that you can do outside of spending any type of money on advertising, because that is a whole another section of it. And that is another strategy that can potentially help take your business to the next level. But we really wanted to start before we get there with the baseline of what are things that you can do that literally cost you no money. They may cost you a little bit of time, a little bit of energy, and a little bit of learning. Taking the time to really learn about your customer and about how they engage with your brand. But all of these things that you're going to see in the subsequent slides are all going to be free things that you could be doing today. But we'll definitely get to the ad stuff in a later session. So keeping it going, was that the last question?
Yeah, we do have a few others, but they're more specific to the platform, so I think we can address them later on. So all
right, perfect. And just being conscious of time, I'm just going to keep going. So again, think of the primary goal of what you're doing is to keep people scrolling, because for Facebook, they just want to be able to present them with more ads. So with all that said, I know that was a lot of information. So thank you for the questions. We really appreciate it. Keep the engagement up. But with all that said, now that you hopefully have a much better understanding of how Facebook views the algorithm and how it uses it to be able to prioritize content, how do you make all this actually work for you? How do you make it work for your business in terms of your strategy relevant to your audience and your business? So in order to kind of visualize this, I'm going to do a quick little case study. So let's just take two businesses and we'll call it brand A and brand B. Based off everything that I just mentioned, if we want to make sure that your brand is organically rising to the top of the feed, the Facebook algorithm is going to reward the brand that has the most engaging content. So again, the content that is more likely to get people to click on it, to like it, to comment on it, share it. And so if you're a brand and you have a competitor who has the exact same amount of followers, even brand B in this example has even one more follower. So in theory, you would think, okay, that's one more person I'm able to reach, but not necessarily. because the difference between brand A and brand B, as you see, is that brand A is able to generate 1,000 engagements, whereas brand B is only able to generate 50. And so Facebook is going to qualify. And again, these score numbers are just for example purposes, but just to be able to show you that this is exactly the thinking that goes into it. It's going to prioritize brand A's, even though on the surface, the content looks exactly the same as brand B's, because they want to make sure that the content by the brand that is going to drive the engagements again is going to be the one that receives the higher score and end up higher in the feed. Hopefully that example makes sense. But first and foremost, I would highly recommend that you take a step back before you post any content and really think about what's the purpose of it? What am I trying to say? Is this something that is going to be informative? Is this going to be something that is going to be, instructional, or is it just an update? All of those content types are important to your business. But I definitely want to suggest that the first thing that you can do for your business to make sure that your content generates the highest amount of engagements, essentially, is that you're doing it for the love. You're doing it not for someone to just like your content. You want to be able to create advocates for your brand. You want to create loyalists. So create content that is going to strike emotionally with them. What is something that's going to make them laugh? What is something that is going to make them want to share it? What is something that's going to make them, really pull at their heartstrings to be able to not only want to comment on it, but also share it with their friends? Because as I mentioned earlier, that is one of the strongest indicators of how strong a piece of content is, because the shareability of it shows that that person loved it so much that they wanted to bring somebody in on the joke, essentially. The second thing that you can do is tell your story. So Facebook stories is something that we've seen really rise to prominence over the last, I would say, a year. Obviously, we all know that Facebook essentially took this concept from Snapchat. It's no secret that Facebook borrows a lot from their competitors. But at the end of the day, that shouldn't concern you. What you should be concerned with is how you can now leverage the massive reach of scale of Facebook and Instagram to be able to reach your consumers. And so tell a story. Make sure that your brand is not only telling a story in the figurative sense, but also literally. What is it that someone who is going to engage with your brand, what are they learning about you? Everything that is a part of your journey as a business, whether it's, we just signed a new deal, we just released a new product, we can't wait to tell you. People want to engage with brands that they feel like they have a relationship with, where it's not just a transactional relationship where, okay, I'm only going to go to them when I see something I like. Because at the end of the day, they become more entrenched and more invested in your business, not only from an emotional standpoint, but financial standpoint, because they feel like they understand a lot more of what's going on behind the hood of this brand. So I know sometimes it can be a little bit challenging to figure out what's the right way to be able to, post a story. What are the right visuals? What are the right texts? As we mentioned before, I think this is definitely a great area for you to be able to test and learn, test out some of the things that gets people to respond back with comments, but also make sure that you're following some of these best practices. So ensure that any text that you have is going to be readable and easy to understand. Yes, you definitely want to be able to make sure that is something that is visually appealing, but in addition to being visually appealing, you also want to make sure that it's actually legible and someone can actually use it. But also, it's a great opportunity for you to tease out any new products, or even be able to use some of their polling functionality within stories to be able to tease out or get some kind of feedback from your customers of what they like. Some little things like those polling units are going to help you rise in the newsfeed, because you're creating a dialogue with your customers in a meaningful way that is not only going to help you, but is going to help Facebook. And then finally, just use it to share any tips or advice if your business is able to do so. If there's something that you've learned or something that you think that your audience can learn, this is a great opportunity for you to almost literally tell them via stories information that you found out that you think is helpful for them. I covered on this one a little bit earlier, but when is the right time to post? So as I mentioned, recency.
If there's a question,
Yeah.
Donald,
Yeah.
are you about to?
Yeah. So maybe we take a second. So first, I just want to say Jennifer, Stacy, Rebecca, Terry, and Joanne. We're going to get to your questions. I'm tracking them. Don't worry. A lot of them I think we'll be addressing with your slides. Bear with us. We did have a question though I think we can address now, which is what is the difference between followers and engagements?
Okay. So your followers are people who have essentially elected to follow your brand. So you know how you see a page, you can go to that page and you can see it because it's a public page. If you were to comment on that page, you're just an engager, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you follow. So that follower number is going to be listed at the top of your page, where it's going to show, the number of posts. So if you've posted 10, 20, 100 posts, it's going to be the first thing. Then it's going to say how many followers that brand has. So these are the people who are actively essentially signing up to say, I want to get more content from this brand as opposed to any other brand that's out there. And that's a powerful metric, but that is different than someone who engages with content, because you can get essentially more engagers by shares or just by being able to come as suggested content within the newsfeed. Excuse me. You can get a ton more engagements than your follower number can tell you. So if you have, say, only 100 followers, that doesn't mean that you can't get 500 engagements. That's going to help grow your business, but that is based off of the algorithm saying that, okay, their content, even though they only have 100 followers, is relevant to a certain audience. Let me show that content to suggest it to them, and those people are going to comment, they're going to like it, they're going to share it, and they're potentially going to be actually become real followers and grow that number that you see on your page. Hopefully that answers the question.
And then we do have another question here I think we can address really quickly as well. And I'll give a stab at this. So it's so Stacey asking, if you have limited time, would you recommend investing in putting blog content on your website, or investing in creating content on Facebook, which is more effective at increasing engagement? So I would say that the question really depends on your positioning and your visibility to your target consumer. So whether your business is, whether you're in the product or the service business, your end customers and how they engage with you can really inform where you should invest. I'm a personal believer that no budgetary or financial decision shouldn't be made without data. So it's proven. So my recommendation would be tapping into a lot of free and accessible tools like a Google Analytics. So to answer your question on investing and putting on a blog, if you connect your website to Google Analytics and you see that you're generating a lot of traction and engagement from your website that's coming from certain areas or targets, because Google Analytics, maybe to give a quick nutshell, is a platform that enables to connect you to your website, that gives you analytics about who's coming to your website, how they're getting to your website, and where are they located. And then from there, you can get a sense of the engagement you're getting on your website. So if your website is a more popular destination to your brand or to your business, then yes, I think putting content on your blog, on your website would be effective. But again, I think you would use that on the same end to prove out the Facebook element. So if you have, it also depends on your target demographic, right? If your target customer is within a certain age range that Facebook falls into, right? If they're millennial, if they're within the, if they're even in the younger generation, the 18 to 25, Facebook could be a potential good area, or Instagram. So using analytics again as a way to kind of gauge where that engagement is coming from will help you determine where it's best to spend your dollars. So these are tactics and things we've advised people on before. So we'll have our contact information here as well at the end of the slide. So if you want maybe just just a tidbit or something more about just kind of how to approach that, you can always contact Matthew and I directly, and we can kind of talk a little bit more in detail about that as well.
Donald, while you're talking, can you address this other question around engagement? How do you share your engagement activity? How do brands know you have a high level of engagement? Because like you said, that could be very different than your followers, right? So if you have a low number of followers but high engagement, maybe that offsets. People tend to look at number of followers and assume if you've got a big number of followers, that means something, but you could have a lot of followers and very low engagement. Which one is the better one? So I think that's a great question.
Well, yeah, I think Matthew, it ties back into what you were just talking about, doing it for the love, right? So, we're firm believers that it's better to have authentic and real connection and engagement with community. So if you have, 500 followers, but your competitor business has 2,000. But if your 500 are engaging or active or commenting or sharing, because I think we'll touch on this later, but not only your organization, but your customers can be your biggest advocates. They're free, they're in a sense free brand ambassadors, right? So every time that a customer engages or comments with you, that's akin to them telling their best friend about your business, right? So they're actively engaging and sharing. So if they're commenting, if they're posting, if they're sharing, and that's actually a great segue because we have our next polling question about this. If they're actually sharing their business with you, that's brand and batter, and that's the best type of marketing because you're getting a proven, valuable referral to someone else. So I think engagement can be measured through how quickly people are engaging with a post. So if you're seeing people commenting right away, great engagement. If you're seeing people share or save your post, and we'll talk about tactics to kind of further that later on. You know, what can you do? You know, what are the best tactics when you post to ensure that you're driving engagement? Because there's things you can be doing to make sure you keep the momentum, right? You know, as soon as you post, being around for the next 2 hours so that every time you see a comment, you're sending love right back. And not even just an emoji, like actual words, like thank you, I appreciate it. You also adding people as well, you know, so there's tons of actions you can do free and organically that helps the engagement drive, because as you're showing genuine thankfulness for that person's engagement, they're more likely to engage in the end. And the algorithm affects that, and that's how you become more prevalent on people's feeds.
Yeah, exactly. I think Donnie hit it on the head. And I think just a way to summarize that so you can keep remembering it is think about going deep as opposed to going wide. Yes, you can, you know, reach 1,000 people, but we've seen so many brands that have, many of them in the past have even purchased followers just to be able to have that vanity number show that, you know, they have 1 million followers or whatever the number is. But when you look at the engagement of their posts, the ratio doesn't match up. And that says a lot because yeah, you can have a bunch of people that know you exist, but do they actually care? And that's where you really want to be making sure that you're prioritizing going deeper with the people who actually care about your brand, as opposed to just trying to get as many people in as possible. All right, so just being conscious.
Mute. Just we've got some noise, some background noise. If everyone could mute themselves, or Matthew, one of you or Donald, you guys are hosts. If you could just mute everybody.
Yeah, I will mute everyone, and then Donnie, you can just come back in again. All right. So I'll kind of fly, just being conscious of time, I want to make sure that we can actually address a lot of these great questions. So I'm going to kind of fly through this since we've touched on a lot of this. So again, engaging with your audience. This is probably one of the most important things that you can do, like Donnie just mentioned, making sure that you're actually commenting back, making sure that you're actually liking their comments, doing the little things that show that, you know, it's not just a one-way relationship, because not only is that going to go a long way in building out those advocates for your brand, those brand loyalists, but to Facebook, it also shows that, you know, there's a cycle that's going on that is going to help them and is going to help you as well. So again, I won't spend too much time on this one. We kind of touched on it. In addition to not only creating engagement, post content that's going to create conversations in your comments. So believe it or not, you know, for a lot of us who follow, you know, some of the larger sites out there, you know, you have, you know, Shade Room, you have Blavity, you have all of these kind of content aggregators, these large media publishers. The way that their content actually gets the most reach is really by the conversations that's taking place in the comments. Obviously, we know that, you know, with social media, it creates a storm of people and opinions. But just because people have opinions doesn't necessarily mean that they're all bad. And also just because there's a lot of conversation going on in a post doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It's actually the opposite. You want to be able to create more posts that will create more conversations where, you know, people can at their friends in your comments, where someone's going to say like, this reminds me of you, or thought you should see this, because those conversations are also going to help the algorithm realize that this is highly shareable content that people want to actually engage with. Another thing that, you know, this one is a little bit less intuitive, is going live. And I know it can be scary because, you know, everyone can be a little bit nervous with going live. This is not necessarily for everyone. This is one of those things that if you are able to figure out for your specific business, ways that you can actually make live videos work for you, it's something that is extremely rewarding, because even if you're only able to get, 25, 100 people who are viewing you live at that moment, yeah, that may not be, the crazy numbers that you would want, but to Facebook, knowing that live videos actually generates a ton of engagement, as you can see here, 6 times more engagement than regular video, the algorithm really, really likes it. And so it will value you a lot more highly. So again, I know live video is one that may not necessarily be for everyone, but this is something that if you're ever thinking about it or something that you're considering, I would definitely suggest at least testing it out to just see how you can actually go live to be able to go deeper with your followers. And then this is one of the last ones in this section. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning, high quality video is definitely something that is of utmost importance to Facebook. As you can see on this little graph here, and again, you'll have this as a takeaway, so no need to take a picture if you don't need. But this kind of just shows you a scale of the types of content that you can post on Instagram and Facebook, the links, but also keeping in mind those 3 factors that you see there, because watch time and completion rate are also very, very, very important things to Facebook as well, because, as I mentioned, if someone's going to sit there through a video a lot longer, or even make it all the way to the end, that shows that that content was a lot more relevant to that user than something that they just watched the first few seconds. And so a few things to just keep in mind when you're creating high quality video, think of content that people actually search for and content that people are going to want to return to. But also keep in mind that you want to find that sweet spot where it's not too long that people aren't able to actually get some value from it. But it's also kind of content that's long enough that people are actually going to be able to spend a little bit of time and help you rise in the feed a little bit more. But also, I would also suggest originality. It's a very important thing for Facebook, because yes, we share a lot of content on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes it's just memes or what have you. But original content is also something that if you can create high quality original content where it's just something that is made by you, that's going to rise as well. So keep that in mind as it relates to your actual video strategy. And again, we're here if you have any questions on what that looks like or how to do it. And just finally for this section, here's a few things that you definitely want to make sure that you're avoiding, because these are things that can hurt you as you're trying to ascend up the feed. So as I mentioned, clickbait is one of those things that we definitely want to stay away from. And sometimes you may not even realize that the post that you're creating could potentially be seen as clickbait. So these are just a few ways that Facebook considers content as clickbait. So if it's a content that links to a site that doesn't seem very like it's a verified source, or it doesn't really provide any value, especially if it's driving them off the platform, it's going to be seen as clickbait. And the client, or excuse me, the platform, Facebook, Instagram, is going to deprioritize it. Any kind of like racy content or borderline content that seems like it's something that people may not necessarily be interested in, or may be divisive, that's something that could be seen as clickbait. Definitely anything that's fake news, or anything that's, believe it or not, health related. Health content doesn't typically get as strong of engagement as other pieces of content. So just keep in mind that if you are in the health space, there's ways that you can still use a lot of the tactics that we talked about earlier in the presentation, but just be mindful of the types of content that you do post that can create more engagement opportunities, as opposed to just content that is just viewed. All right, so that is it for the upfront section. Again, I know I threw a lot at you, but hopefully, over the course of the last 30, 45 minutes, you were able to learn a lot about just how the algorithm works, and just a few ideas of the ways that you can tactically be able to improve it for yourself. But I'm actually going to pass it off to Donald, who's going to take you through some ways that you can actually make it work for you on each specific platform.
All right. Okay, so just to give you a snapshot here, as we go into this section, we're going to be talking about the ways that you could actually outsmart this algorithm. So we're going to be breaking through 4 key forms, and we'll also try to touch upon some others with different questions. Please keep in mind that this section actually talks about organic, so this doesn't involve any type of paid tactics. And just so you understand the sequencing, we're going to talk first about the algorithm itself, what each algorithm looks for in engagement. So that will answer some of the questions we were receiving. And then we'll break down some of the new updates to the algorithm and then specific examples and tactics to use to kind of combat that algorithm or outsmart it. So let's start with Facebook. So Facebook, just a quick rundown of how some defining factors of their algorithm. Of course, this isn't everything, but some of the key highlights. It prioritizes content from friends and families and members over businesses. It heavily prioritizes content from people who you engage with. So as example, people who post and like on your content or who message you. It prioritizes the number and length of comments. It prioritizes the number of reactions and the variety of those reactions. So whether they're likes, comments, shares, and it shows both recent content from the top of your friends and highly engaged content from the friends and that you personally engage with. So I know we had a question about how Facebook can be confusing. And to a degree, I do understand that, right? Because Facebook can be filtered from your friends and who you engage with. But as you can see through the definitions of some of the features of the algorithm, there's a lot of variety to it. So it can give you kind of different signals. So these are, again, some driving, defining factors to the algorithm. So these are things to keep in mind as you formulate your digital marketing approach for Facebook. So what are some of the key updates for 2021? So Facebook is beginning to now prioritize posts in groups and events. So thinking of this as a tactic, it's good to understand now that Facebook from an algorithm perspective, so to ensure that your feeds are reaching the most amount of people and are at the top, your engagement and your use of groups and events could help drive that. So that's something to consider as you're building out your Facebook plan, engaging in more groups, engaging more events. They've also implemented recommended tag listings for when you're composing a post. So similar to what you might experience on different platforms where they might give you specific proactive suggestions on different tags to use. The Facebook now has this feature where it can give you a sense as to what some of those good ones are, so that you could get a sense as to how much your post will reach from a tag perspective. So another interesting feature that is something to consider. Now it is again in a beta form, so it will roll out and more, but so you will see it, but again, it is in the beta form. Now let's get into some examples. So the first fundamental step, I think that's very important, is if you have, and I know there were some questions about your Facebook page and the creation of it and how to drive traffic. I think the biggest thing to start with is making sure that your posts are set to public, because when they're public, you gain the most traction with your followers. So, here we provide a quick snapshot on what the screen looks like. And, if you have further questions, feel free to ping us offline, via email or what have you, and we can kind of provide you with a little more. But, I think first and foremost, make sure your posts, if your objective is to get the most reach and traction with your followers, setting your post to public is the first fundamental step. Okay. Next, I would say that it's great to ask questions to inspire engagement. So here's a specific example that we thought was pretty compelling, where we have a brand here that did a kind of post that says this or that. Really something it was first, I think, was designed in a pretty creative way. And then also it's very concise, not too lengthy, but also it drives a call to action, right? So this or that, tell us which pop culture characters made your winning, right? So when you made your winning list. So I think this is very relevant because as you're creating your own posts, it's very important to think about what your users are engaged in and making sure that the post itself is akin to your brand identity and your brand affinity. So creating posts that, again, drive interaction, are concise, can be read quickly, and have some have a link at the bottom. And I think a very important too about your links is making sure you're using different platforms to minimize your link so that it's able to be simple and easy to read, but also clickable, are great tactics to use. So again, asking questions to inspire engagement is definitely one example in which you can combat the algorithm, because you're generating more organic engagement, which, as we outlined earlier, is what Facebook is using as a measure for their algorithm. Another example is posting content that encourages meaningful and lengthy comments. So not just posting content to post or asking questions, because I think there's another topic around how things can get stale, right? And how do you build a right mix, I guess you can call it, to make things fresh. I think one thing to do is that you use content that actually engages in lengthier comments, because the length of your comments, the engagement, and the variety, as we talked about, is another feature that the algorithm is taking into consideration. So here, for example, is another one that an example of a post that can lead to more lengthy comment. So again, this is another, REI is a health, and I would consider a consumer product brand, but also that is in kind of the outdoor space. So having something that speaks to kind of that is a good way of developing more engagement and more comments. So thinking about your brand, thinking about your customers, what their passions are, where there might be different intersections or synergies, and creating a post that can drive more lengthy comments. Another big one, very simple, but it's to use Facebook video. And that doesn't always have to mean you have to go live, but to use Facebook video is a very important tactic. And Matthew had specifically highlighted, how the engagement varies and increases so much when you use Facebook video. So, using it in different ways can really, be an effective manner. So here's a great example of an ad that made it into the Super Bowl a couple of years back that used Facebook video in a very effective way. So, using Facebook video and starting out, developing content, experimenting not only in length, but style, gives you a way to get really started. And then the statistics show that the videos engage more engagement. So it is worth to give it a try. Okay. So now we're going to talk about Instagram. So what are some of the Instagram defining factors of their algorithm? So here we've listed out a few here, and some differences and some similarities, but it prioritizes posts with the highest number of likes. So the number of likes will be a big driver in the algorithm and how your post will be driven kind of to the top there. So that's definitely a big consideration. So when we talk about ways and specific things that algorithms are looking for Instagram in particular, the number of likes is a big driver. It also prioritizes very recent posts. So posts that were created within minutes of the user logging in. So when you're opening up Instagram, there will be prioritization placed on what posts were created most recently. So you have to think about that well. So that really drives again back into timing. So, think of that about your frequency as well, your cadence, how often you're posting. Because again, in Instagram in particular, it does give priority to when a user is opening it. So it makes you have to be, more in tune with when your users are coming online. It prioritizes posts with profiles that the user engages with typically. So if they're engaging with profiles that fit your brand identity and fit kind of what you're engaged with, spaces that you're in, accounts that you're engaging with or connecting with, you'll further your ability to fall within this algorithm to be, higher on the feed. Your number of reactions are important too, right? So how, your number of reactions, how many people are reacting to your content, whether it's Facebook Live, Instagram Live, whether it's a post, whether it's a story. The reactions are a big key. So what kind of content, can you create to drive that reaction? We'll get into some examples after this slide. It also prioritizes posts with hashtags that the user follows. So hashtags is a big thing. I know we talked to Nicole about this leading into this conversation, and it's important to understand that hashtags are a mechanism to connect to a broader stream of content. So it's not really like an exclamation point or emphasizing your post, but rather it is your connection to a broader community. Because there are people and users, I'm one, for example, that might follow a hashtag that has to do about community events in Harlem. And so if you're using a hashtag that connects with that, you'll then get more reach because there are users that are actually following that hashtag. And then also that plays into the algorithm, as you can see here. So your use of hashtags are important. Now, it's not good to necessarily overuse hashtags because I think there's an importance in the blend, right? You don't want to use too many hashtags that are great because then it'll be harder for you to be discovered in a larger pool. So you want to use a great mixture of larger hashtags, but smaller ones that are more unique and bespoke to your brand that you're talking about. And then it also occasionally shows posts with greater engagement from a profile in the using of a hashtag that's similar that you don't follow. So that's another thing to think about is engagement. Engagement is a big driver. And then it's believed that it treats brands and and the content from a consumer at equal level. So there's some parity there. Now, what can you do with these defining factors? What can we actually act upon? So some quick updates before we get into that. Our first, as Matthew talked to this clickbait topic, posts with clickbait or engagement will not get recommended. So, it's important to understand that if you're doing more clickbait activity that is trying to get quick response, it's not going to hit the same. So you should try to avoid that. Contests and giveaways will not get recommended either. So I think that's a great point, because there's a question in the audience about giveaways and how it can get stale. Is there other ideas? Well, the algorithm for this year is actually not prioritizing or recommending them. So you might see less activity being driven from these type of activities. So something to keep in mind when you're building and executing your strategy on Instagram. And then repurposed content from other sources won't add value to being recommended. So reposting another account's post, or taking a popular video from another account and putting it on your platform won't necessarily drive or be a great factor in driving engagement and upping your place in the algorithm. So they're taking that measure. So again, these are very key, very succinct, very simple, but very key changes for this year that you really want to keep in mind as you're building your strategy, because a lot of the activity you see online is doing some of these things. So it's important that you're ahead of the game and you understand that some of these tactics really won't help you get to your ultimate goal if your goal is more engagement, more visibility, and really combating that algorithm. So let's get into some examples. So I think the first one is that during the first 3 hours after you post something, you want to make sure that you're doing your best to immediately respond to every comment. So we gave an example here of a brand, has a pretty strong following, but they made it a point, within the first a couple of days, that they were engaging with their customers, and they were engaging with different posts. So here's just a quick example of kind of just a happy kind of way of responding to someone's post about the picture they used. So not only is it compelling, high quality content in this picture, but they're taking the time to be dedicated to overlooking the comments and things are being said and responding in a meaningful way. So not just your prayer hands or your thumbs up, but actually giving a little bit of text to really develop that community connection. So I think that's very important. So as you post, make sure you're being aware of who's engaging and try your best to really thoughtfully or playfully, in a nice way, respond to the posts and comments that you're receiving. The next is to write meaningful captions. So, it's easy to kind of put up a caption and sometimes just put a hashtag or a link, but it is worth taking the time to write a caption that's meaningful, thoughtful, but that kind of, a unique way ties into what you're trying to portray within the content you're showing. So here we're giving an example, and I think they've done a great job here in not only giving a kind of clever comment or caption to their post, but also providing a clean, short link through Bitly, and then also having an call to action with the code. So I think this is a perfect example of how you meld multiple strategy in one. It's not a long caption. You can see it within your scroll. It's concise, it's to the point, it's clever, it's meaningful, it has a link, and it has a call to action. So it kind of gives you everything kind of within one shot. So again, something to think about. The next example here is to ask questions. Ask questions in your captions to engage your audience. So when we talk about, Instagram emphasizing engagement and the variety of engagement as an algorithm driver, you want to make sure that you're actively asking questions and then in the comments, asking and engaging more, right? So here you can see Bose put out a post and then, again, concise, to the point, meaningful text with a nice, quick, short question that makes sense and kind of goes into what the content they're sharing. So just another quick tactic that helps feed what the algorithm is looking for, in a sense. Okay, so moving on to Old Navy here. Here's another example. So there's really there's not one way to apply hashtags. So it's best to kind of experiment with different forms. So we did talk about hashtags not just being the emphasis of a point, but really being able to connect your post to a broader kind of community of posts that fit within a certain category. So it's important to experiment with them, test them out. So there's a lot of platforms, and as we mentioned, even in the new features, you're able to proactively see and get suggestions on your hashtags in this beta rollout. So then think about that as you're building it out. So here you'll notice 3 very simple hashtags. So not 20, not 30, but 3 concise, meaningful variety of hashtags. You have Old Navy style, which is a larger one. You have flats, which is kind of more bespoke and specific to the post. And you have a grass-fed, you have grass-friendly, and it's a nice play on the flowers being inside of the actual flat. So again, it kind of hits all those threads, right? You have a big hashtag, a more bespoke, unique hashtag, and then a friendly hashtag that all comes together to tap into all these different communities of posts that help you get the best chance at broadening your reach and your visibility. So another kind of great example of how to use hashtags. And you can see even in the caption, they had a question. It was concise, a little mixture of emoji, kind of a really great post example there. So something really to refer to as you're looking back at this, maybe later, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. You know, you can look at some of these captions as examples to help inform how you might make your next Instagram post. Okay, and then utilizing stories is a great way. So utilizing Instagram stories to get more organic reach with an audience without affecting your feed, right? So a lot of times communities and pages use their feed in a certain sequence. You might have a cadence that you use, right? Whether it's 3 times a week, twice a day, 4 times a day, whatever your cadence is, you might not want to disrupt that if you have a quick idea or a question or a poll that you want to extend to your community. So a great other tactic to use are stories. And again, tying this back into the algorithm, variety is a big driver, right? So the algorithm will favor you if you're using the content in multiple ways. So if you're testing out not only posts organically, but if you're using stories, it will help you get a better positioning into that algorithm. So here are some quick examples. One is a quick survey. So a nice engaging picture with a survey gets you, it works to me. I love surveys because it gets you data, it gets you insight, it gets you reaction, it drives engagement because users are actively clicking. And then another tactic is something more simple and more organic where you're just, you're giving a suggestion. So if you're a brand or you're a service, if you're a service provider, giving a quick tip or a helpful guide or something like that with an image and very succinct with a link in a bio to get more information or drive, maybe to that blog post that you're trying to think about to drive to your website. Using stories is a great way of doing that. I personally engage with stories a lot, and I find myself using the surveys a lot if I find it interactive and unique to my experience. So I think these are great examples that I hope you guys can find useful when you refer back to this content.
This is a good question from Joanne. Are stories a good way to repost more often without ruining the IG look since they exist only 24 hours? That's essentially what you're saying, right?
Exactly.
Pop up. Okay.
Exactly. So again, yeah, people might even do grids on their Instagram pages. So if you have a cohesive cadence in how you post that's working, but you have other creative ideas or things you want to test out or other launches, the story is a great way to do that without disrupting your feed. Or I'm sorry, disrupting kind of your cadence.
Yeah, okay, that's how it. And does Instagram measure DMs that you receive related to a post? Does that count towards engagement?
Yeah, so that's a great point, right? So if anybody notices from your stories, right, you can react to it and message it, and it goes right into a DM. That's another. It goes back to the algorithm. It's another type of engagement. So the better engagement, the better post will incite that user or your audience to actually engage with it. That will result in a DM, and that's just more variety and engagement that feeds the algorithm. So the algorithm is looking at you and they're saying, okay, they're not only they're posting at a great consistency, but they're also using stories, and their stories are generating DMs. Those are all different forms of engagement that are feeding that algorithm. So you're going to find your stories occurring earlier. So if you notice in your screen as you're looking across, your positioning in your story will consistently move up and up, and your feed and your visuals and within hashtags will improve if you're using more variety. And not only that, but you're getting engagement from all the different types of posts that you're making. So yeah, that's surprising.
Terry, I know you have a question about hashtags. We have an entire course that they're going to do on hashtags. So that is like a deep dive. I think that's the next one, right, guys? Is it
correct? Yeah, the next
so you'll
session
get
is
all
hashtags.
that whole class is hashtags. So don't worry. That's why we broke it up into 8 different courses, because each one needed its own class. So they're going to cover all that. All right, sorry.
Okay. I'm sorry, is there going to be, this is Terry, Harlem Network News. Is there going to be like a 101? Because a lot of this I am figuring out myself. And so sometimes I'm not really doing the stories because I don't want to look crazy and I'm not sure what the ramifications are. So is part of this going to be like a 101 for each thing? Because, you know, depending, we're doing cross-generational.
Yeah.
And I'm really new to this. Maybe other people are, but I want to get as much as I can and know as much as I can. So, you know, maybe.
That is the goal. Again, this is the first time we've done something as comprehensive where it's like a multi-course. So the whole point was to be able to literally, I had these guys, because I'm like you, Terry. I said, talk to me as though I know nothing. And I had them create the course for each little section, because I didn't even know how a hashtag worked. I said, I need a whole.
Yeah, I don't either. Yeah.
Right. So hopefully, if you attend each course, by the end, you will have gotten the 101, but we're really trying to go deep in each section.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, so just kind of hang tight, and then, you know, and we're going to keep kind of massaging this organic, this process, because, you know, this is really, really important that the businesses learn how to do this, because it's the future. So
yes, this is incredibly amazing what the doctor asked for.
Yeah.
We're all going to get this. I cannot get it from, you know, go to YouTube. That's what, you know, the 10-year-olds say, just go to YouTube and you'll figure it out. That's not clear.
Great. So we'll let the guys finish up, and then I know some people have to drop off. It's 11:30. They've got a few more slides. So for anyone that can still hang, please do. And then we'll do some questions. And just know that we're going to send the presentation, the recording, because it's a lot of information. So at some point later today, I'll send out a bit of a recap with this information if you do have to drop off. If not, hang with us, and they'll finish up in a few minutes.
Yep.
Go ahead.
For that. Okay, great. So I think with that, we'll get back into it. I think we're making some good progress here. So hopefully we won't hold you guys too much after. So another tactic here, still in Instagram, is to stay consistent. So I think there were a ton of questions about cadence and how to post, timing, and all these things. I think the biggest thing that the algorithm is going to want to see is it will downgrade you if you're posting at random times. So if your post and your cadence is kind of unpredictable, it actually hinders you. So I think the biggest thing to do first is, I know we had questions about how often, timing. I think the first thing to do is to really ask yourself, what can I manage? What is a consistency and a cadence that I can manage and stay consistent to? And if that answer is 2 times a week, that's okay. Because I think the biggest thing the algorithm is looking for is that consistency. So are you posting consistently 2 times a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week? And as you build your cadence, and as you're using some of these examples, as you're referring to this to kind of build out your strategy, as you're gaining more experience, your cadence could then improve, right? And then you're also understand from engagement what works, right? And when I'm posting 2 times a week, I'm doing great. When I start posting 3 times a week, I'm even doing better, right? So you might find the right cadence, and that's all going to be unique to your followers. So the answer is not always so definitive. I think a lot of it, again, kind of ties back into the testing. So I think, again, the first question, what can I manage? What can I do consistently? Because the algorithm cares about your consistency. So what can you manage? And then once you develop that, building that routine, and then building from that. Because you might find that doing 3 times a week is actually not generating more engagement. So you really have to kind of experiment it. But the first step is to develop a consistency that you can manage. So I think that's the big message here. And now we're into LinkedIn. So we're two platforms down. We have 2 more to go. And so LinkedIn, I'm not sure how many users are using it, but it's a great platform that is primarily used in more of the business professional space. It has a very unique and bespoke user base. So I guess if your targeted marketing fits that demographic, it's a great tool. It's grown a lot in this pandemic. And also they've revamped their their advertising mechanisms and their algorithms, and we'll get into that a little bit. So, same cadence, right? So we'll first talk about the defining factors. For LinkedIn, a little different. It prioritizes content from users whom you may have engaged with in the past and who post consistently. It prioritizes content from users to get large amounts of engagement, even if you don't tend to like or comment that post. So that's a quick kind of difference. And as we get into that second point, where you see that the engagement sometimes comes from large users and not necessarily measured by the comments. It favors lengthy comments. So the more length and high volume in the reactions actually helps you in your positioning within the algorithm. So lengthy comments, more text heavy is actually a good thing here. So similar to Instagram, where it's good to be concise and to the point. Here you can kind of, if you have something to say, this is a good opportunity to do that. It does not prioritize content from business pages. So business pages and users are on the even playing field. And then it prefers native content, such as text posts, images with text and video. So native, and that's a buzzword kind of in the ad space. And I know Matthew can touch on this a lot, but native is kind of like the subtle posting and organic way of doing it. So it actually favors that versus kind of the resharing and the active kind of like, I guess, posting of content where it's better, where they actually prefer when it's good, it's rich in text, it's rich in post, it's rich in image, and it's native versus kind of more aggregating and sharing of that nature. So those are some kind of defining factors for LinkedIn. Now there are some updates, but what we've tried to do here, given that it's kind of a new platform, is give you kind of a little bit of a diagram. So on the left-hand side, we hope this is something you can refer back to and look to if you're looking at LinkedIn to promote your next business, your next event. If you're into live events, good option. This is a kind of a diagram that kind of walks you through how the content creation and how the algorithm works. I'll try to talk about that a little bit and without kind of getting too into it. So we, in the essence of time, but basically to talk about it, every time that you post an update to LinkedIn, there's a bot, and this kind of touches into the bots. That was another question. It immediately places the content into 3 categories: spam, low quality, and clear. So naturally, you don't want to fall into the spam. So you want to use tactics that get you away from that. So that's some of the algorithm tactics that we referred to in the prior slide. So more native language, rich in text, rich text heavy. Those are things that the bot will quickly be able to determine if it's actually spam or not. Your post is then sent to your audience to see how popular it is. So the bots and the systems itself are also testing to see how popular is the content that you're posting. So your post's initial engagement is actually going to determine a lot of its faith on how it falls within the algorithm filter. So then after that, the content is then scored, and it's based on different actions: liking, commenting, sharing. And then what's interesting in LinkedIn, a real person, so not a bot, but a real person is going to assess all of these factors, and then it's going to make a determination on whether or not your content is going to extend outside of your network. So you then have the opportunity to not just share your content with whoever is in your network, whoever you're engaging with, but even outside of that. So that's kind of a quick and dirty rundown of how it works. As we move forward, let's talk about tactics. So, timing, we've touched on it on the other platforms. We're going to touch on it again. Choosing the right time to post. This is a professional social media platform. So naturally, a lot of the professional networks that you're going to see have 9-to-5s. So you have to think about that as you're posting, right? So as you look on the left-hand side, it shows that the most clicks and shares happen to be on Tuesdays between 11 to 12 p.m. To me, that makes sense to a certain degree. Lunchtime, you're dealing with a professional network and professional community. Lunchtime, that 11 to 12 is going to be ideal. You want to also think about time zones. So the next point here is to experiment and refine. So some research suggests that the best time to post will depend on things like location and time zone. So you want to make sure that you're thinking about that. So if you're a East Coast company, but you service your customers are very West Coast based, right? You just happen to have a lot of West Coast customers, which you can tell through other platforms like just on Google Analytics, Shopify. They'll tell you where your customers are coming from. You might want to post on LinkedIn at times that are more conducive to their time zone, right? So thinking about that. Then, what's also important is it's a growing mobile phone. Their member base is growing on the mobile phone. So right now it used to be heavy desktop. Now it's about 50-50. So LinkedIn put out new statistics that about half of its users are checking their accounts through their mobile devices. So now some of the restrictions around time zones and things like that might lessen because you're seeing more of the activity transition to the mobile, where the Instagrams and the Facebooks are. So you'll see that pendulum shift, but again, because it's a professional platform, again, most of the community is that 9 to 5. I could tell you I engage with LinkedIn mostly on my desktop, and then sometimes on my mobile device, but a lot on my desktop. So so you have to keep that in mind about the customers, your target audience, right? That's one tactic. Another tactic are get your employees involved. There's ideas around, depending on the size of your company, you can develop things like employee incentive programs where you have initiatives internally to help your employees elevate the brand and elevate themselves. So quick takeaway here is you're stronger together. Your employees, just like your customers, can be your most reliable advocates for your brand. And given that most of your employees will likely have an Instagram account, hopefully as well. It's a critical way on building more advocates. So here's another example of someone within the organization taking the time to talk about their company, talk about the company they work for. And that's the best kind, right? Having ambassadors that are working for you and believe in your brand and are actually amplifying it. It's a great way. So it helps. And also thinking about networking, your employees' network is different from yours and your businesses. So as they post, as they engage, you're actually broadening your reach. So looping that back into the algorithm, the multifaceted ways of engagement are going to be a driver, right? Are going to amplify it more. So again, employee engagement is critical. And then your employees are your best brand ambassadors again, right? So encourage your employees to share, talk about the company, encourage your employees to actually say that they're working with you. Things like that are also great ways and forms of engagement. It exposes you to their profiles, to their followers, their engagement. So all is well there. The next idea is to use rich media content to create bigger impact. So, so the takeaway here is, keep it business casual. It is a business platform, but that doesn't mean that you can't get creative in the types of content you use. So, I'm a big fan of Gary Vee, and here's just a kind of a cartoon kind of graphic that he uses, and it's very common for him to use in addition to video content. He's really big with video and LinkedIn as well. And it's just another way to drive great engagement. And you can kind of see that in the statistics below when you look at the amount of comments, the amount of likes, all things that, again, feed into that algorithm. So, adding visuals that appeal, whether it be photos, whether it be cartoons, whether it be graphics, whether it be video, these are all things that will help you gain more engagement. And again, it's going to help you stand out. So you want to stand out amongst the group. You don't want to actually stay within the cliche. So it's good to also experiment. So cartoons that are relevant, that make sense, are also great to use. So, again, try to mix it up. And then joining groups. I think one thing that's very unique to LinkedIn, and probably other platforms are catching up, but from a community management perspective, LinkedIn is a great tool because it's actually made easier. LinkedIn has groups. It has powerful community management features that allow you to communicate with your groups through daily and weekly digests. And it's not something where it's kind of spam maily like something might be an email. It actually falls into an inbox. So you're getting a notification in your message. So it's more personal. So again, if you're looking to build community online, LinkedIn is a great tool to do so. So if you're a community platform, if you're a service provider, or even if you're a product trying to build community, there's, using LinkedIn is a great tool to do that. And also kind of getting back to groups staying active and community drivers, you can also create recurring, communication. So, similar to how you might segment different emails, you can do that on LinkedIn. So a great tactic to keep in mind. So we're on to our last platform, Twitter. So Twitter, we want to say that the founder of the hashtag, we definitely wanted to touch upon this, and we're going to again go through some of these defining factors. And I'm going to take a quick look at them. Okay. So, for some of the defining factors for Twitter are that it prioritizes recent content. So, if you're familiar with Twitter, it's a timeline. It's historically been one. So it's going to prioritize recent content. So when we talk about timing, when we talk about cadence, you have to kind of switch your game up a little bit when we talk about Twitter. There is a heavier prioritization from an algorithm perspective on how often you post the recent, because that's what you're going to find rising to the top of the algorithm. So something to keep in mind. And also the engagement, of course. Prioritizes content that's posted recently, so within a few minutes. It prioritizes content with retweets. So the more your content is retweeted or commented on or liked, it feeds that algorithm and you have a better spot. It also prioritizes library accounts. So the posts that regularly active and engaged, that helps and feeds it as well. And it also is moving in the direction of that rich content. So it prioritizes tweets that contain images, GIFs, and videos. So another way to really stand out again is using GIFs, using videos, great way of driving more action and building more traction in your algorithm for Twitter. So let's go through some quick updates. So Twitter is actually doing a lot of new things. What we tried to do here for reference for everyone on the call today is to give you a quick timeline of what's happened with the algorithm, but I want to talk more specifically on the right what's happening in this year specifically. So now what you're going to be able to do, and it's only on iOS, so if you have an iPhone, it's going to work on iPhone for now, but you will now have the ability to toggle between the top posts, tweets, and the algorithm and recent posts. So, kind of leaning in the direction of top posts, top tweets, engagement, you're going to have an ability to toggle now. So something to keep in mind as you build out a strategy on Twitter. Verification is a big thing, right? The blue check. So there's actually been Twitter's actively taking steps to make it easier, I guess, to attain that in a sense. So you won't need a profile or bio or a header image to receive verification now. And the minimum follower count is on a personal regional basis and no longer per country. So now the measurement of the minimum follower count for a verification is actually more regional and less on a wider country basis. There's more strict rules around how the blue checks are going to be removed. So once you have it, there'll be stricter ones on how it's removed. And there will be categories of verification like academics and scientists. So your verifications are also going to be bucketed into categories. Are you an academic that's posting? Are you a scientist? So it's gravitating toward more thought leaders within the space as well. So things to keep in mind as you build out a strategy. So now let's talk about tactics. We talked about them prioritizing and liking the use of photos and GIFs. So here's a great example, things to know. GIFs are for real. They do work. So Twitter data shows, and this graphic will tell you, that GIFs receive 55% engagement in tweets without them. So it's always best to use a GIF. There's great sites out there that you can search and find multiple GIFs on. Using them as long as they make sense and they're kind of connected to what you're trying to say is a great way on Twitter of driving engagement. And videos work too. Don't discredit videos. Twitter released statistics that videos are 10 times more likely to drive engagement. So videos work. So GIFs, photos, videos, great ways of driving engagement. Encouraging followers to engage is another great way. And so going back to the algorithm, they like accounts that have a lot of retweeting, right? So, it's great to use different tactics. So here I gave a few examples. I think we want to start off with simple statement. If you ask, you shall receive. Ask questions. Ask for feedback. Twitter is a more conversation platform. So if you have something to say, if you want to engage, you want to talk to your community, asking questions is a great way. So ask questions and then ask for replies and then use GIFs and emojis to do that. So you're not only feeding the algorithm's affinity for GIFs and videos and emojis, but you're also getting that feedback and retweet. So it's kind of two things at once. You want to also add incentives to your account. So we talked about contests on Instagram. Instagram is moving away from that. Twitter likes it. So adding incentives through Twitter contests, engaging and countering in different ways like that are another great way to drive engagement and feed and better position you within the algorithm. And then also, again, similar to other platforms, be prepared to engage back. So when you ask for feedback, if you ask questions, if you want to retweet, respond, right? You want to be there, you want to engage back. So here we've included a great example with Slack where they asked a question, so a user responded and they came right back and responded back. So I think just something important, as you can see here, it was in the same day, right? So another important tactic, right? As you're talking, as you're engaging, it's not simple to just get it out the door. You want to be around, You want to hang around so that you're engaging and communicating back and forth with your community, because the more engagement, the better position you are in the algorithm. So here's just another example. You want to join relevant trends, but I want to be kind of specific here. You want to be part of a conversation on Twitter. Twitter, it has historic conversations that have catapulted brands, businesses, individuals, influencers, and all the like. So joining conversations is an effective way to do that. But you also don't want to come on as though you're kind of hopping on different trends, right? So though you want to join conversations, you want to make sure at the same time you're being authentic. You don't want to trend jack or news jack. So you want to make sure that you're joining conversation on Twitter with topics and themes that make sense for your brand. So if you're a brand that fits in the athleisure space, hopping into a conversation about fit, about working out, about cycling, about athleisure wear, footwear, that makes sense. That makes sense. But if you're kind of hopping into conversations that really don't make sense to what you're talking about, you do hinder your authenticity, and that will hinder your algorithm positioning. So it's great to be in conversations, but at the same time, keep in mind you want to be authentic, right? So just some tactics there. So tags, this is also kind of our last tactic, but I think probably one of the most important ones. Twitter is that it was where the hashtag was birthed. So they're big on them. So you want to make sure that they're using them and using them perfectly. So we use this example in the far left because it kind of was like a great mixture of everything. So I think some key things to know about hashtags are: one, they're a great way to get traction with branded and others, right? But also you could keep an eye out for some of the trending hashtags. So people always refer to who's trending, what's trending. So you want to make sure that you're keeping abreast of what that is. And Twitter will actually recommend and use more hashtags per tweet. Also, you want to make sure that you're intertwining them in a very, again, native way. So here's a great example of how within the message they used hashtags to kind of tell out what they're trying to communicate. They used a high quality image, back to the traction, the GIFs, the photos, the Twitter likes. And on top of that, they retweeted underneath and tagged somebody. So it's kind of like, a great example. So I hope that, as you guys are using Twitter, that you can refer to this example, because what it does is it really kind of shows you all the steps within one. So it includes not only the seamless integration of a hashtag, it also includes tagging, it includes a video, and then it engages back. It expands its audience with a call to action. So again, a great example of something on Twitter. And given that it is a hashtag, it's also a great segue, because our next session is going to talk about just that. What the hashtag, how, when, and why do you use them? So that session is going to be taking place in a couple weeks. So we hope that you tune into that. You can clue in and follow both Harlem Park to Park and T10 for more information about it, and we'll be promoting that very shortly. So we look forward to getting into more depth about the hashtag. So if you did have questions about the hashtag and more specificity, we're going to definitely touch on that in a lot of depth. We're going to, again, our hope is that each one of these sessions not only is informational, but also gives you reliable content that you can take back and apply. So we want to give you examples. Hopefully we've accomplished that today. We want to make sure we're giving you examples that are rich in content that you can then look at and refer to as you're actually taking the steps to implement these strategies. Okay. So with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to my co-founder, Matthew, to kind of take us through our Q&A section.
Hi, everyone. So thank you. You guys have been great about sending questions to the chat. I've tried my best to make sure I answer all of them. I think I got them all, but if you have any questions that I may have missed or anything that you haven't felt comfortable putting in the chat, now is a great moment to just ask. Again, there's no bad question. There's no stupid question. Again, this is all for you. But if you have any questions that you may think of after, we'll provide our contact information where you can reach us. But also looking forward to having you for the subsequent sessions within the series. We have 7 more that are going to go as deep as we did in this session on specific topics outside of this. So again, this was amazing. Appreciate you even staying beyond the time. It just shows that you guys were really into it, and we really appreciate it. Tell any other business owners that you think could benefit from this information. We love to have them. But continue to use us and NACOA and Morgan as a resource. We're here to go as deep as you need in this information because we all want you all to win, because when you win, we win, and we all win together. So thank you.
Yes, you guys, this was fantastic. So comprehensive. Hopefully everyone agrees that this is what you were asking for from the meeting. And I would say, yes, Ramona, do you have homework? Absolutely. I would say that for everyone that to try some of the techniques that the guys mentioned today, creating some of the posts, using the formulas that they kind of outlined with, I love the hashtag, call to action, bit.ly link, all of that. I thought that was really interesting. And that way, when you come back in 2 weeks, which I'll be sending out the link, we'll create the flyer and send out the registration link for the next one later this week. When you come back for the March 9th, you can talk about what worked and what didn't, because that's the whole point. Is they're going to be layering. They're going to add every 2 weeks. And so you should be coming back having tried what they said, try the stories, go in and do all of this stuff. And at least then you have some context for the next session, which is hashtags, what worked, what didn't. Again, you guys did a fantastic job. I couldn't be happier with it. And I feel like once people get the actual deck and the recording, you can go back, you can listen again, you can look at the slides. They gave really great slides with examples. You can actually like replicate it exactly and just fine tune it for your brand. So we'll send all of this to you so you don't feel like you're trying to remember it all. I think I saved the chat too, because there was great comments and, and questions in the chat. So I'm gonna try to compile all of this in an email and send it out so that you have all of this to then look at over the next 2 weeks.
Shipping that I can do.
So if there's any questions, someone, any other quick questions? I know it's almost 12 o'clock, so thank you.
I have a quick, Terry Wisdom, Harlem Network News. I have a quick question. In the homework, where can we go to just like get the basic skills of Instagram, Facebook, Twitter? I mean, I'm like struggling, but I'm getting it out there. But I'm like self-teaching and figuring it out, and I want to be more, prepared like for the next meeting. So if I could get, some 101s to do that, it would really help me because it's very stressful just trying to, get it out. It's like birthing a baby or something. I need help.
Right. Yeah. Well, okay. So these guys also have a consulting firm. So ultimately, again, through this program, obviously you can see they know what they're talking about. So in terms of one-on-one services, I mean, we hire Harlem Park to Park, we've retained them to provide the coursework. But in terms of one-on-one, you can certainly, speak to them about some additional guidance. But, through this course, it's going to be challenging because, we're having so many people that are signing up to attend. I have a feeling we're going to have a larger group next time. I think it would be difficult for them to do the one-on-one, but I do understand, Terry, and Morgan is available, our program manager, Morgan. So if I would say your first course of action would be to contact Morgan, who handles our social media, and ask her questions or get some guidance through that. And then, it's okay if you come back for the next session and you still feel like you haven't gotten it right. Like, this is not easy. This is a lot to learn. And so the fact that you feel frustrated, it's a new discipline. It's an absolutely new discipline. So just fumble through it and try to do it. And then as you ask questions, we'll learn over the 8 weeks, 8 courses, which is over 16 weeks. You're going to be better at this by the end. Like, we're all going to be better at this by the end. But don't feel like getting off this 1-2 hour session, you should be able to go write the best post and you're going to have the most engagement and all of this stuff. I'm going to have to go back and look at this deck and listen to the recording and look at the snapshots and all of that. So just be comfortable with the fact that right now you're in a space where you don't fully have a handle on it, because most of us do not. So I would just say contact Morgan, who, of course you have her email, but I'll I'll put that in the email for those that want to do direct. And then of course, for those that feel like they have a better handle on it and they want to look to hiring these guys. I mean, again, we're all small business owners. They are small business owners too. So, you know, their time, you know, they have other clients. They also have full-time jobs. So it's kind of a lot. So if you're interested in, you know, that's also part of this. Is just like with all of us, they are marketing their services to you right now as they do these presentations. So certainly if anyone is interested, they have a program called Curbed, which I guess they can talk to you guys a little bit more about that in the next session, but this ultimately leads to a full suite of services that they offer that is what I've been looking for Harlem Park to Park, for you guys to be able to access just for this purpose. So that is where this is all leading. As you can see, they're very, very strong in this area. So all in due time. So again, I think I'm looking.
Okay, thank you, Nicola. And
welcome.
if they can,
I'm right there with you. I'm learning this. It's a generational
thing. If
thing.
they can put their direct information, because like everything, you know, because of what I'm doing, everything is time sensitive, and I need to maximize and make it happen. So if they can put their information, because, you know, I mean,
we'll put it in the chat, and then I'll also include it in the recap email that you'll get from me.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Sure.
I see it. All right.
Thank you, Terry.
All right. Any other questions? If not, this, you know, we can end the session. Guys, I'd love if you could stay on for a few minutes. I just want to chat with you really quickly, but thank you everyone. It was great engagement. We had most of the group stayed on the entire presentation, which is fantastic, and a lot of activity engagement. So
this was amazing.
This was a real need. So so thank you to everyone for attending. Look out for our email, and be sure to register right away when I send out the link, because I have a feeling word's gonna get around. A few people were asking if others could join. I did increase the capacity for our Zoom just in the event that we got to that place, so we should be okay. But I think you know, I think there's gonna be a lot of interest. So thank you to everyone, and yes, Ramona, Park to Park and HLVP get priority. Yes, you did. So I will make sure that you guys are in before it gets locked out. So no worries there, always.
Okay, if we registered for this one, are we registered for all of them, or it's 1 1 1 1 1?
No, the reason why I purposefully did not put all of the tickets for each one, because what I didn't want to have happen was someone just go in and take all the tickets and then they end up not continuing with the course. And so it will lock someone out that actually might find out about the course, you know, midstream. And so, you know, people have a tendency to just go in and just select all, and then they've locked they've locked out the tickets for those that might actually want to participate. So I'm going to release them each week for each session, because I have a feeling it's going to build. And so I want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to get that. So my goal is today, by the end of today, to get the recap out for this. And then once the guys get me the flyer for the next one, we'll start distributing that, and with the link and everything for sign up, probably by Thursday or so.
Awesome.
Okay.
That works.
So just remember, you need to register for each one. Cool. So
thanks for joining.
Yep.
See you in 2 weeks.
Everyone. Yep. And we'll see you March 9th.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you.